for joining this webinar. So let me just introduce myself. My name is Pratigya Kalra. I'm an evaluation advisor for the World Bank on this open learning initiative. I've been facilitating some of the M&E work and developing some of the content for the M&E work in the module that you're going through right now, Module 4, over the last 3 iterations of this program. I've also done 2 rounds of this webinar before. Besides consulting for the World Bank right now, I'm also a consultant to a number of other organizations on M&E, for example, KPMG, the UK's Department for International Development, among others. And I've also worked with a number of social enterprises on their M&E systems and processes. And I did all of that work as a part of the International Finance Corporation, where I was previously for about 5 years heading up their M&E work. Prior to that, I've worked with the private sector and also with a non-governmental organization. I'm based out of India, but I've really been working in different parts of the world on strengthening M&E for social impact. So thank you very much for joining the webinar today, and we'll jump right into the presentation. Thanks very much, Charlie, for pulling that up. So this webinar is really about learning from M&E, and what we're talking about here is using data to inform decisions. So just to give an outline of what we're going to be covering in this presentation, we're going to talk about why M&E is important, a recap of what you already learned in your self-paced learning presentation. Then we're going to talk about some easy steps of how to integrate M&E into your organization. I'll give you some examples of organizations and companies that have used data to inform decisions. We're going to go through 4 different case studies from different parts of the world and different sectors, each of which highlights a different way in which M&E has been used for decision making. And we'll talk about some of the common pitfalls that can prevent your organization from successfully leveraging M&E. So let's jump right into a recap of what you've already covered in your self-paced learning presentation. So just a very quick summary of what you did there. So M&E is really about measuring progress, and that's about tracking what's getting done, and particularly monitoring is about measuring progress. But as you know, it's also a little bit more than that. It's also about learning, it's about adaptive management, and it's about identifying what needs to be changed and how to change it. So if you look at the first cartoon there, I hope this is visible to you all on your screen. But there's a group of people sitting around a table asking about, does anyone really feel that we could have done better? That's something that M&E could tell you. If you look at the cartoon below that, it's asking the question, so did what we actually did work? And that's another question that M&E can help you to answer. But increasingly, M&E is about accountability. There's enough instances nowadays where social businesses or even for-profit businesses are being asked to demonstrate what they're actually doing, the sort of impact they're having on society. So for example, India, as you know, has passed a law that requires large companies to contribute 2% of their profits to social causes. And the focus on impact measurement is really on the rise in this country. In addition to that, it's also motivated, M&E is really motivated by the desire to build the legitimacy and credibility in what enterprises are doing. And evidence is really the most powerful way or the most powerful tool to convince your potential funders, the public, or any other stakeholder of the importance or relevance of the work that you're doing. Besides this, there's actually a lot of data that shows, that M&E is important in attracting investment. So for example, one survey shows that more than 80% of fund managers actually think that impact measurement is important in raising capital. And over 70% of grant makers actually feel that foundations don't receive enough performance assessment information. I wanted to share with you something that I read from a website the other day. I was going through the Schwab Foundation's website, and this is the Schwab Foundation for Social Entrepreneurship. And this is a foundation that annually supports about 20 to 25 social entrepreneurs, basically people whose businesses have been in operation for at least 3 years. And it doesn't fund their businesses, but what it does is it provides them some support to link them with universities, service providers, and other organizations that can provide them different kinds of services, either pro bono or at a reduced cost. And when you look at the funding criteria, or the support criteria rather, for the Schwab Foundation to work with some of these entrepreneurs, one of the criteria that they mention specifically is proven social and or environmental impact. And I'll just read specifically what the website says. So it says we expect candidate organizations to have a monitoring and evaluation system in place and be able to not only cite quantifiable data when discussing their impact, but also to explain how the information is used to improve the organization's product or service offering. These systems can be internal, but ideally the impact should be able to be verified by an independent third party. So that's just to give you an example of one foundation or one organization that's really looking at credible impact data before it makes its funding decisions. And that's really what you see also on the last cartoon in the slide. So impact measurement is becoming increasingly important to actually get any kind of funding or donor money. So with that recap, I wanted to share with you some of the questions that I generally ask social enterprises or other organizations that are thinking about integrating M&E into their organizations. Just to give you an example from the kind of work that you're doing, I know that one of the participants for this course is working with the Dominica Planned Parenthood Association or DPPA. I'm not sure if Marilyn has joined the webinar, but I understand that Marilyn is sort of designing a program right now for teenage mothers, where they're trying to provide teenage mothers with secondary education and also to offer creches or daycare centers for their children while the mothers study. And she's in the early phases of designing her program, and she's really trying to think about a number of different things, including M&E. So Marilyn, if you're on the chat or anyone else who's doing something similar, I would encourage you to start with 5 basic questions. So the first question is, what does success mean to your enterprise, right? So this is a very fundamental question that you need to start with, and that's really about clearly defining your objectives. And I know that through Module 4, you all have gone through a little bit of orientation towards how to define your objectives. So that's a good place to start. The second is, how will we know whether we're achieving success, right? So, and this is about the results chain where you define the process of change and also the monitoring plan to track progress. And I know you've gone through, again, some exercises around the monitoring plan or will be going through them, where you talk about the indicators, the frequency, the sources of data, and so forth. So that's the second question to ask. How will we know whether we're achieving success? So the third question is really, what you see in the cartoon here. Who is going to use the data that we track and for what purpose? The last thing you want is a situation that's faced by the cartoon, the people in the cartoon, where after years of hard work, they set up a data system, and the only thing they discover is that nobody wants to use it, right? So ask at the get-go while you're designing the data tracking system, what sort of data do you want to track and for what purpose? Fourthly, how is the data going to be used, right? And here what I'm talking about is the feedback mechanism. That's the kind of processes or systems that are going to be put in place or already in place to ensure that the data is used. And some examples of the kinds of processes that you could use are, periodic review meetings where people sit around and reflect on the data, how it's going to be used, data dashboards in the organization, simple Excel dashboards where everyone has access to the data, or brown bag lunches where people just come together over a lunch meeting to discuss the new data that's come in and what it actually means for everyday programs or projects or initiatives. The last point is really about resources. So what resources do you need to track this data? And by resources, I'm talking about human resources, I'm talking about budgets, but also increasingly important is infrastructure, particularly IT systems. So what sort of IT systems do you need to track this data? Do you need an online, an app, a mobile platform? Are just laptops and desktops sufficient? Do you need a cloud-based platform? What exactly do you need to track data? Also, do you need to hire an independent agency for data collection? That's something that's very, very important to think about at the get-go as you're thinking about your M&E system and the kinds of budgets and resources you need to put in place, because independent data collection agencies usually come with a significant incremental cost. So with these 5 questions in mind, I wanted to share with you a few examples of organizations that have used M&E or data effectively to make decisions. And we've deliberately tried to cull out a number of different examples from different parts of the world, but also a range of sectors. So it's not just health, but we're also talking about agribusiness here, we're talking about a not-for-profit, and we're also talking about energy. So the examples that I walk you through, what I want you to keep in mind is just the M&E approach that each of these organizations is using to inform decision making. So in the first case that I'll talk about, you'll hear about how evaluation was used to inform a decision for scale up, right? In the second case that we talk about, we will basically be talking about how a health enterprise is using mobile data to make decisions. In the third case, we'll be talking about how another enterprise that looks at energy solutions has used market research to collect monitoring and evaluation data. And in the last case, we'll talk about a tool called the Net Promoter Score, where an enterprise is using a very simple tool to collect feedback from its clients. So these are the four different approaches that I'll be highlighting in the next four examples that we discuss. Okay, so moving on to the next slide, this is the case of evidence-based scale-up, so really using evaluation data to scale up a program in the sugarcane sector. This is something that I had worked on when I was with IFC. This is a project that was started in about 2008, 2009 with a sugar company in India. So sugarcane, as some of you might already know, is a leading cash crop for farmers in Uttar Pradesh. Uttar Pradesh is one of the poorest states in India. It's a central Indian state. It has over 4 million sugarcane farmers. DCM Shriram Consolidated Limited is an IFC investment client. DSCL is the short form, the name for the company. It's one of the major sugar producers in the state, and it has 4 sugar plants with over 150,000 farmers in its supply chain. So at the time that this project was designed, DSCL was facing a problem, and the problem was that it had these 4 sugar mills, but the sugar mills were not getting enough sugarcane from farmers because sugarcane productivity in the catchment area of these mills was very low. So these mills were running at less than full capacity. So what they wanted to do was enhance the productivity of these sugarcane farmers in collaboration with IFC. IFC designed a productivity enhancement program where it worked with these farmers, trained them on good agricultural practices and methods to increase their productivity. But importantly, it also helped DSCL to put in place a monitoring and evaluation system that would help them to regularly collect evidence and to build a case for whether or not this program was working. So the basic objective here was to work with a sample of about 2,000 farmers in a 3-year program and to try and increase the productivity of these farmers by 25 to 30% from baseline levels. If this program worked, the company would the same activities. Was to determine the business case. If you will, for scale up. Right? So if I can just direct you to the slide for a minute. So what you're seeing here are some of the results of the evaluation. So in the first year of the evaluation, the data found that 23%. So the treatment group and the control group, when comparing the productivity increases for these two groups, the productivity increase was about 23% over baseline levels for the treatment group. And the control group that actually did not benefit from this program saw a decline in productivity of 11%. In the second year, they tracked these results for 2 years. In the second year, they found that the treatment group farmers saw productivity increase of 86%, whereas the control group farmers saw productivity increase of only 19%. So as you can see, there's a clear difference. 86 percent minus 19% between the treatment group and the control group. And that was really what could be attributed to this program. There are a few other things that the company did that I wanted to highlight to you. So one is that they had put in place a project steering committee, uh, which was really the steering committee that was responsible for the evaluation. So they ensured that there was complete ownership. For the evaluation for within inside DSCL. And this committee met on a regular basis to look at the data that was coming in from the evaluation and decide how they were going to make decisions based on that data. The other thing the company did was think about evaluations with a long-term view. So they plan a 3-year evaluation. They provided the resources for it up front and to make sure that they were able to hire somebody for a 3-year period to undertake. This independently. However, the results the implementation of the findings etc. was something that was completely internal to the company through the project steering committee. So the result of this entire exercise and the evidence they were able to collect was that they were able to generate enough evidence to make a convincing case that this program was actually working. And they scaled it up from about 2,000 farmers to more than 13,000 farmers initially, and then eventually to 50,000 farmers. So that's really an example of how you can use convincing evaluation evaluation data to make the business case for scale up. Let me take you now to the next example. Which is the example of living goods. And Charlie, if I could ask you to pull up notes 8 for a minute, please. I think we've jumped to the next set of notes. Thank you. Okay, so this might resonate a little more closely with you. Uh, with you all, which is basically an example from the health sector. Living though is a social business that started in 2007, and we're talking here is how they use mobile technology to make decisions. So this social business supports a network of community health promoters. These are basically micro entrepreneurs women, about 2,500 community health micro entrepreneurs. They go from door to door. They teach people on how they can improve their health, and they also distribute a number of different products like